panelists. Test.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Hi, my name is Roberta French, and I work for a company that you might have heard. It's called WD-40 Company. Some of you have the products in your garage. I lead the cybersecurity practice for the company. I have been in the industry for 20 years, but today I'm honored and excited to be moderating the closing sections. Our panels, they're seasoned cybersecurity leaders that they're going to be here. They're going to provide invaluable perspective and will leave us with actionable items that we can use to then improve our security postures. So without further ado, I'm just going to let them introduce all of them one at a time. If you want to start, Eric.
Test. Yeah, Eric Bartlett. I just switched positions to Bolt Medical, same title as the one I was at previously. So good to see all of you. I've been to this conference. I think this is my third year now, so it's a good conference.
Hi, I'm Lisel. Like Kim mentioned, at a small biotech called Gossamer Bio, where I oversee cyber risk compliance. It's a small shop, so a lot of hats, third-party vendor management, and a myriad of others. But happy to be here.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Vimal Subramanian, CISO for Q Health, based in San Diego. I have a question for all of you guys. If you want a seat in the board, why are you standing outside? Nobody is willing to come to the front rows. If you are not going to come to the front rows, don't expect a seat in the board.
Hi, this is Irvin. I'm an information security officer.
Irvin, can I interrupt you? Can I ask everyone in the background, we are streaming this. We have about 150 virtual people. I know it's great to have conversation, but if you could take it out in the hallways, our virtual audience will not be able to hear if there's side conversations in the background. I know that's annoying, but I appreciate you guys working with us. So please, again, we need to get the back conversations down so our virtual audience can hear. And I'm sorry I interrupted Irvin, so it's back to you, Irvin.
Yes, thank you, Kim. This is an honor for me to be here. This is my second year. I'm an information security officer for a company that has several U.S. clients. The company is based here in the U.S. And I have experience, over 20 years of experience in different industries. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. So we'll start with the first question, which is, as it is impossible to stop all cyber attacks, do you agree or disagree that organizations should focus more resources on recovering for cyber incidents? And we'll start with Lisel.
Thank you. Checking that it's still on. So I absolutely agree that it's impossible to stop all incidents. Like someone talked earlier today where it's people's full-time job, 9 to 5, getting salary paid to come and attack companies, right? So there's no way to stop. That said, I am not team only focus on recovery. I think recovery is absolutely important, right? We all have our plans and we're working on testing, BC, PDR, and incident response plans. But I think, honestly, we have to put eggs in all the baskets, right? And depending on your industry and what your tech stack looks like and your, various threat vectors for your specific business, it's really the combination of preventative, detective, monitoring, and what that looks like across the board. So unfortunately, I don't think we can pick and choose. It is kind of the do-it-all. And I was trying to think of analogies of, your kids' toys are everywhere, but do you just not make them pick up at the end of the day, right? Like you have to kind of keep up on things and keep building controls and keep addressing, right? We don't just focus on one area and neglect other areas. So, for me, it's not, kind of throwing hands up full stop because I know that attacks will keep coming. It's how do I, keep kind of pivoting and addressing all of these threat vectors.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else has thoughts they want to add to that.
As she said, it never ends. That's the whole thing. And a lot of, especially when you're dealing with upper management that aren't as familiar with IT, a lot of them, I mentioned in my notes here the zero trust thing. I've had upper managers try to slap a thing saying, oh, let's do zero trust and we're done now with cybersecurity. It happens all the time. And they don't understand it. The zero trust thing to myself is a little bit of a misnomer because upper management that's not as familiar with IT tends to think that's an end-all scenario, but as she's just described, it doesn't ever end. That's the whole thing. It's got to constantly, cybersecurity is an investment, not a one-time expense. That's what I would add to that.
But you,
I don't even know the question.
oh, we're doing introduction. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. My name is Darren Bennett. I work for a defense contractor called Kratos. Just changed over to that organization. I really enjoy it. Prior to that, I was Chief Information Security Officer for the city of San Diego. I've done this for a long time. Prior to that, I worked, most people care the most about this one, for a little organization called the FBI on a cyber squad here locally for 8 years. So I've kind of been around the block, and I apologize very much for getting here late. I was on a conference call, and I left about an hour ago from North County, San Diego, and traffic's a zoo. So thank you.
Good. Do you want to?
Yeah,
do you have
sure.
something to say? Yeah.
Sure. I agree with the Lisel. We cannot put all our eggs in one basket. We cannot prevent every attack. So we have to make sure our recovery, whatever we have the recovery plan, it is up to the mark, because our customers are going to look at one thing, right? How quickly we recover. Customer trust is very important. Right? So that's what matters. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Irvin, is there anything you want to add? No. We can move on to the next questions if you want, or yeah, we could do the next. Yeah. Yeah. We'll go on to the next questions. So, what is the best way for security professionals to communicate the level of cyber threats back to the teams and to their boards, as they need to be aware of cyber threats more than ever? Eric, do you want to start with that one? Answer that?
I could jump in too if you want. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So for cyber, I think for boards and audit committees and any upper level, it's really how does it relate to them? It's making it relevant to them. So it's business risk, it's the why. Why is this important? How is this going to impact the business? And really translating that. We tend to talk, we get excited about cyber things and talk in very technical speak, and we're immediately losing folks who are at a board at a business level. So it's really translating the why is this important? What does this mean from a company perspective? If there were a breach, what's the worst that could happen in auditor terms of how could this affect our business, our operations, and really kind of helping them bridge that connection between cyber could impact our company, here's the why, here's the how, and how does that translate to dollars?
Thank you, Vimal.
And I'll add a little bit to that. I mean, talking with upper management's always difficult. Again, cybersecurity is generally looked at as an expense for the business instead of an investment. We've all experienced that to some degree or another. So, I mean, really talking with upper management, what I've had success with is putting it really simply, let's look on our industry, say the healthcare sector, for example. Pick an example. It's really easy. I've been on other, talking to other panels and things before where you can bring up an example, okay, similar company over here, similar amount of employees had a breach last year. It cost them $2.5 million. That's really easy for a board of directors to understand and put a number to when you explain that to them in that kind of way. So. And it is getting a little bit loud back there, guys, too. It's kind of hard to hear ourselves up here. So if you don't mind turning it down a little bit, thanks.
Yeah. Can we have
think
some
they're
quiet
having-
in the back of the room?
I think they are having some interesting conversation at the back. Maybe we want to hear that. Can you come and speak here, please? So we can all enjoy that conversation, right? Okay, I just want to add one more thing. Earlier today we discussed about how we can communicate, basically as long as we align the business objectives, that they can understand, it will be easy for them. So you can also show them the baseline, where your organization stands within your industry sector. Basically, if you are a healthcare organization, where do you stand? So you can look at your external cybersecurity profile and show them, okay, this is where we are compared to our competitors. then they're going to understand. So they only understand the numbers and the risk and what they hear from the news media, right?
Can I add just a super fast thing too? That's one that reminded me has been really helpful where, we'll show kind of the funnel of we had, say 2 billion attempted attacks this year. And for them, it's like, cool, what does that mean? Is that a lot? Is that a little? What's the context? What's the perspective? So from an industry perspective, is 2 billion a lot for a small company? Is it not very much? It's exactly like you said, helping it kind of put it into perspective from our company and the greater, what is a lot? What is a little?
Yeah, so one key factor that have worked for me in the past is where I align the vision and the mission of the company, and then I talk to the upper management or board of directors regarding on financial terms. So whenever you talk about protecting the income stream, it's always a key on that, and they will pay attention to you.
So for me, I mean, these guys hit it. It's all about knowing the business needs and being able to argue that, or not even argue, being able to show that this is a business need. And if it's not, honestly, then maybe you don't need to secure whatever that is that tightly. The other thing that I don't think's been mentioned is, I mean, for me, it's be succinct, but also be real. And I mean, Lisel said it well, which is, communicate it clearly, don't get all technical. And when I was speaking, I mean, the mayor would have me come in after there'd been a big intrusion. And what you see is what you get with me. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But I think for the most part, the board or the executives, they're so tired of people trying to impress them all the time, they'd rather you just cut to the chase. And as long as you're prepared and you have the right information, at least I know that was my opinion, it's better just to come in and cut to the chase and give it to them simple. And as long as you have a clear message, they'll be happy to hear it.
Thank you. And it also goes down to the level of risk, right? Also communicating the level of risk to the company. Because, for example, for us, we don't sell to people, so for us, a PCI risk doesn't mean anything because there's no reason for us to invest. It doesn't apply to us. So it's just be able to communicate what is really the threat for the company specific and what it is applied to your environment versus generic and all. Anyway, next question is how concerned, so we know that there's a lot of turmoil all throughout the world. So how concerned should ordinary organization be about nation-state cyber attacks, and what do you think is the real threat for them? Do you want to start?
I can start with that one. When you get into the nation-state, the nation-state threats, you always encounter the APT thing, the Advanced Persistent Threat, which is a nation-state threat attempt. So I kind of treat it as one and the same. Really, it's just a more complex cyber attack, and it never ends. And usually the nation-state attacks have a lot more money behind them. You're dealing with a government sponsoring the actual attackers. That's the big difference there. So you've got China and Russia and some of the big players that have a lot of money they're putting into their attack things. So then as an organization, you have to consider your own risk factors. And that could just be, if you're, say, a 501c nonprofit that serves shelter services for kids, is a nation state going to be really interested in attacking you that much? Probably not, so to speak. Not that they wouldn't if they could get in, but you got to kind of look at your risk appetite. That term's thrown around a lot, but if you're a contractor, so you have to also look, their nation states are always going after government organizations, but generally they go after private organizations, and a lot of those private organizations work on contract for the government in some way, shape, or form. And the US government, I know just from my own research, has been getting better and better about enforcing their own internal cybersecurity practices on their vendors and their contractors, considering how many contractors work for the US government. So really, it's all about risk appetite is what I would say with it. What you think your organization, who's going to be targeting you, and we all should be treating you, I guess, ourselves as being lucky or popular enough of a company to get the eyes of China trying to attack us or something. If you treat it in that aspect, cybersecurity is cybersecurity. The same principles that protect HIPAA and all the other different major things, it's the same principles of cybersecurity that go across a lot of different governmental regulations and such. So,
I think you nailed it with the whole nation-state thing. I mean, to me, again, having worked for the Bureau, I worked primarily national security, which is foreign hackers. And then there was the other type, which was cyber crime, and it's all a crime, but they split it into two areas. To me, at the FBI, we cared a lot about who the actor was and what their specific tactics were. In the role I'm in now, or when I left the bureau and went to the city, I care about the tactics, but I don't really care as much about the actor. They all use the same tricks. And unfortunately, my experience for my hundreds of incidents that I got to deal with while I worked for the bureau is that they don't have to use their best techniques in general to get in, even to the big organizations. So for me, it's, while it's fun to talk about the different APT groups, or it's fun to learn some of that, and it's useful if you're very, very solid on everything else, great. But otherwise, I'd say it's the same old story. They have their 0 days, they have their really elite team. They don't need to use that much. So in general, I think most organizations need to focus on, are we following just normal best practices? And if we're doing that, then we can maybe start going, okay, now at a defense contractor, there is a little more focus on that because there are certain groups that do want to specifically target us, but.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wouldn't say it's not a risk for you, right? Exactly to Eric's point, these nation-state threat actors, they're putting out tons of probes. They're, throwing a lot of hooks out there, seeing what comes. We've seen some, the QR codes coming through phishing emails has been a big one for us recently, and I read that was Russia-backed, right? So there's a lot of these that will just be out there, but exactly to Darren's point, it's all the standard procedure, right? It's phishing, it's the QR codes, it's, whatever threat is coming to your users, it's still that same approach that you're going to take to address those. It may not be that specific nation state having a laser microscope focus on you in particular. However, you're still having your security procedures and controls, being ready to address those threats if they happen to land on your company.
The last thing I'll add is one of the more recent ones, the Colonial Pipeline. That was simply brought down by somebody's expired VPN credentials. It took absolutely nothing to create an entire national issue out of something so basic. So I mean, as far as like us as cybersecurity professionals, yes, we should be concerned with nation states because again, as was said, they use the same tricks in the book. You don't necessarily have to be that big of a target for them to get you a big thing. And the Colonial Pipeline was a big target, but you saw what happened with that. Something very, very simple is what happened with that piece of it.
One thing I want to add is I didn't mean to make it sound like we should be very concerned with nation state, but the way to remediate that isn't necessarily focusing on the actors as much as focusing on just basic hygiene and best practices. I mean, we know what works for the nation state guys. It's the same things that works for the criminals. It's the same thing that works with the script kiddies. So, if we take care of it, it's the same thing works across the board.
So with that said, I just want to let you know that I'm doing the cybersecurity PhD, and my research is to provide for all of you guys for free, like a cybersecurity guidance for next year. So hopefully it will be published, and it's going to be available for you to just follow the principles.
So one of the other things I wanted to add on the cyber threats, before, you mentioned that phishing was going to be one of the things, and before with foreign entities, the spelling was bad, or the emails, you could see that was correct. With generative AI now, it's becoming more and more complicated to really identify because it's easy to say, correct this one for me, and make it look very legit. So there's just an extra level of things that we need to be more aware of. That's interesting. So moving on to the next one. What is one takeaway for a CISO wanting to be more effective in communicating cybersecurity to the board and business leaders? What will be one of the tips that you want to give to a CISO that needs to be more effective?
I think it is the same thing I'm going to repeat over and over. It is organization objective. You talk to them in the language they understand, language of strategy, not language of technology. And always show them the dollar, okay? Compare them against your peers. And then you always have to make sure, be friend with one or more of the board member. That's what I did. And in fact, what I did during one of the board meeting, I just enticed them that, okay, guys, do you have any question? How can I help you? Then they kept quiet. Then I asked them, hey, do you want to receive the monthly security trends? You want to see that? Ah, sure. That is how I enticed them. Then now I am hooked with in a professional manner, okay? I have been talking to our audit committee chairperson on a monthly basis. So she is basically a security champion who is supporting the security initiatives from the board side.
Something that, oh, go ahead, Darren.
No, go, Lisel.
Something that came up for us recently, and perhaps this was just our thought, but in prepping for the next audit committee, we talked about, what if this was an opportunity to educate folks on the board and on audit committees about cyber, right? The SEC disclosure about cyber came out recently, and while they removed the requirement for the board to have cyber expertise, we thought, could this be an opportunity to present global threats to them, not just threats to our business, but very briefly, here's what's going on in the world of cyber. Folks at that level, and not just sound patronizing, perhaps don't have the extent of experience that we do. They're not hands-on keyboard in the cyber area day in, day out, right? So it's really helping them understand the global threat landscape, our threat landscape, kind of bringing that top down, how does it relate to our business, and using that as an, professional and respectful educational opportunity, right? While also presenting the company, metrics, stats, what have you. And then to the point, Darren and I were talking about earlier, and like Vimal said, translating, putting it in their language, right? What does the board care about? And then shaping our presentation so that it's relevant to them, they understand, and it helps drive our outcomes that we want while also being important to them.
Lisel, you stole my comment. It's perfect.
Sorry.
It's basically tell them a story. And again, from my perspective, it's just be genuine, know what they need, what their interests are in advance, and what the needs are for the organization, and present it. But tell them a story, and certainly it doesn't hurt. I mean, that's the time. You don't want to. The focus needs to be on what they're going to be concerned with and how it impacts the organization. But right behind that part of that story, it's always good. That's where, hey, is APT a concern? Absolutely. And if you're a defense contractor, do folks in a far eastern country really want everything we have? Probably. Whether you're a defense contractor or anyone else, is there a place in between that far eastern country and here where they want to steal anything they can? Yes. And it, sometimes it doesn't hurt to show those scary numbers that are out there. I mean, I know you guys have probably all heard, and I've said this a million times, that they've done some studies, and if cybercrime was its own world economy, it would be the third largest after the US and China. It earns more money than the entire drug trade. Do we treat it that way? That's what I always ask people, and I feel like we don't. So giving some nice little stats like that, I think, is very useful. I try not to do too much of the hellfire or brimstone, because they're like, yeah, that's all great, but how does that apply to our business case?
So Darren brought up a great point. One of the other presenters brought up this notion that the amount of money that comes from cybercrime is the third largest GDP in the planet after US and China. And so what I've noticed is that the board is receptive and they understand, but then there's this thing of security fatigue where, because there's limitless concerns out there and we have to take a layered approach, but at a certain point the board is just like, haven't we talked about this enough? We have zero trust, we're good. So how do you guys, when you reach that point, what would your tactic be to try to bring them back into the discussion and have them kind of keep an open mind that we're dealing with cyber criminals that are looking at trillions of dollars of potential value of information?
Yes. One of the key factors that helped me out regarding compliance is, for example, there's a company, a US company, that has a contract that is worth millions of dollars with Amazon. So if they're not compliant, and even they don't comply with requirements, they will lose that contract or that revenue. So that's why I said in the past, let's protect the income revenue and let's focus on that, because with that, you talk to the board and said, you know what, if you don't comply with this, and you have to tell them how much it will cost you to lose that contract with Amazon. It's gonna cost you millions of dollars compared to 5% of the income for your cybersecurity budget. So you put everything on perspective.
And I think you make a great point, right? Because if everything's a problem, then nothing is. So it can't be the world is on fire all the time. You're right, that does, then you're burned out, literally, right? It's just like fatigue, like to your point, if the board's hearing that everything is a problem. So I think that context, and Roberta made the point about risk ranking and having the correct amount of risk and label assigning so that they're not hearing, there's constant problems all the time. It's relative and, perhaps the threats, wax and wane, right? Or, providing that context for them, I think is helpful. So it's not, to your point, exhausting.
And one little thing, these have all been great points up here. One little thing I've found that's been helpful in my career with, especially in an office environment, is finding those people, not necessarily at the highest levels of the company, the C-suite, the board of directors, finding those employees that maybe are a manager of a team there, the ones that come to you, and you can usually tell the ones that are actually interested in cybersecurity, or they're curious about what you think about something. Those are the ones that are really good to keep their interest in that and identify who those people are, because they help spread those kind of good practices within their own small teams. Because it's not necessarily going to be the C-suite or the board that has, one of the members of those teams that has a problem and results in a breach. It's usually the lower ends of the company where it just takes one person. So the more you can spread it in the company and that awareness without, like she was saying, make it feel like fatiguing, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the other thing is be sensitive to the fact that, unless you're a tech company, a lot of those folks, security is a word to them, and they've heard it on the news, and they understand that it's a threat to their organization. But, if you're WD-40 and you're manufacturing WD-40 and you're an executive, now they may have the most technical group in the world, I don't know that. But their focus is very different than what ours is when we're talking to them. So again, you have to tie it all in and tell that story. And it's easier for me to do this than that, I hate to admit it. So it is a challenge for all of us. It's a really good question.
So down on the same line, there's a question? Okay.
No, Roberta, I'm not going to ask you all the uses for WD-40. That's
Okay.
another conversation.
There's over 2,000.
So, no, I have a question for the panel, and that is, other than AI, what's new this year? What are you guys thinking about this year from a cyber perspective that you weren't necessarily thinking about or giving focus to 12 months ago? That's my question.
Yeah, it's a good, for us, it's just the evolution of the program. AI is a huge one. I think we're going to talk about that in a bit. But it's the, kind of to Darren's point earlier, too, the threat vectors change just from a phishing approach. So for us, we've seen, like I mentioned, the QR codes has been a new type of phishing email that we haven't seen in the years before. So it's how do I train my users to keep an eye out for these new threats? Or, a big one that we've had is the CEO text phishing, where folks are getting these CEO text to their personal phones, and while it's not company relevant, they're still coming to me for these things. I've also had, just in the last couple of weeks, folks who interacted with bots on LinkedIn and got their LinkedIn compromised. So it's, while that may not be directly company relevant, that's been something new this year, where it really has become a partnership of how do I help educate folks about threat vectors in their personal lives as it relates to the company, and then different trends that we're seeing this year. And of course, just evolution of the security program of, perhaps once we get to a state where we're happy-ish, like I will never say it's perfect, but happy-ish with the zero trust model, it's, what else has come out from our security tools. So a lot of the tools and the vendors we use are continuing to build out their service offerings. So it's, am I taking full advantage of everything that they've rolled out in the last quarters? Am I even aware of new things that say my firewall is doing? It's like, oh, cool, that's new functionality. I didn't even know that was a thing. So just really keeping on top of trends and rollouts that the products are offering to is something this year. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think the next buzzword will be quantum computing, right? So everybody started investigating into that. Generative AI helps us a lot in many ways as security people, but we have, bad actors are also using it. They are getting better at it on a daily basis. They don't no longer make spelling mistakes in the phishing email. Okay, we train our users for that, but they are getting better at it. So other than that, quantum computing, that's what we should focus on. Are we quantum ready? We need to focus on that one.
So for me, if I can add, so AI, it's prominent, we talk about it, but it's been around for a while too. So we do have tools that leverage AI before this, became so prominent. The other thing that we're looking is, defense in depth, many layers of defense, and we're looking how many things. So zero trust is pretty big too. Really allow access to only who's allowed to have access, and only to the systems they're allowed to. Be able to just tighten down even more and block it as more as possible to just the least amount of privilege. Those are big for us. Now, AI is going to be great. Of course, it's going to enhance it and make it even more, and it's going to help us with the recovery. But there's so much more, and there's so much in there.
I was going to say, it was funny when you said not AI, because all of us were probably thinking, like, oh, we want to answer that with AI, because I was like, are me going to go to? So I had to think about that for a second, too. But one of them, specifically, I would look at MFA. That's something that everybody was rolling out frantically right when COVID happened. That was like, everybody had to do it because everybody was going remote. Now, the original COVID was just, SMS verification. Now we all know that that's on its way out. I mean, in that evolution as far as just MFA is gone in just a matter of the last year is now everybody's trying to switch to authenticator apps. And, you'd mentioned geolocation and other advanced features, and then that will be something that will be an attack vector later. So that was just something that came to my mind is after you asked the question about something specific in just the last year is just MFA as well.
Yeah, MFA is a good one, and it's something that's been around, but it's like many things, it's the old is new again, I guess. I was going to say, I was thinking of, for me, one of the things that I see and I've seen everywhere I worked is, well, there's two parts. One is being able to view your encrypted traffic, and I know there's a lot of tools. I won't make people raise hands, but we all know it's not trivial to do that, especially across the whole entire world spectrum of what you have. And the other one is when your team is hunting or when you're using, the best tools in the world, and they can have, I won't say it, this other new technology that starts with the letter A and ends in I. But as cool as that is, they have to have the insight, and you also have to know what normal traffic is, and it's really, really hard. I mean, I can tell you my friends back where I used to work, the adversaries are very rarely using normal, what we would consider easy to find mechanisms. They're using legitimate traffic that goes to something like a Microsoft Teams connection, or, and for me, that we as a community, I don't know. I mean, if you guys know of really great solutions, I'm sure the folks over here, some of them will come up to me afterwards, but I would love to see it. It's really, really hard. There's so many false positives, and then there's so little insight into that traffic. It's just tough.
Other questions? Good question. Yeah. So how can the importance of security and compliance budgets be conveyed to stakeholders during an economic downturn or struggle? Who wants to take that one? Oh.
It's kind of similar to what we had touched on, right, of just the prioritization, the risk, and how that plays into the budget, because security will still be important. It's still a huge threat, like Eric was saying, even just providing examples of other companies in the industry or other major breaches, and that shows, resulting lawsuits and dollars lost, that, that scare factor is still there. So I think when you keep on top of these things presenting to the board and the audit committee, then you don't lose track of how it is important, such that in a budget downturn, that falls off the budget, right? So it's really staying top of mind and communicating from a risk perspective.
So in healthcare, there is a saying, patient care sees no budget, right? We need to provide, if you are in healthcare, you have to provide the care regardless of the money, right? So you have to provide. So as far as information security is concerned, there should not be any budget. There should not be any limitation. We are generating revenue for the organization. We are basically cutting the loss, reducing the loss for the organization. So I don't, agree with that, that even if there is a business slowdown, the business is not going to, shut down their shutters, right? They are going to continue to function. That means you still need to have lights and electricity, right? Have lights and fan and AC. Security is similar to that. You need to have that. As long as you can translate and tell the management that, okay, this is a revenue generative function, you need to have that, otherwise you end up with a loss of this many $1 million, then they will understand those things.
I'll add one piece to that too. Always looking for low-lying fruit. So there's a lot of really good security practices that can be implemented that are not to break the bank. Even MFA and basic ones like that. Some organizations don't have that, and that's almost not even a cost perspective things now. Everybody has it. I used to work, for an example, worked in the nonprofit sector for a while, and going out there and looking for dollars elsewhere to implement security practices, especially in the nonprofit realms. There's a lot of free dollars out there to do things like that. So it's more so, we obviously all wish we had an infinite amount to spend on our IT budgets and cybersecurity, but it's always a method of prioritization. Like, where can we get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, out of our, implementing good cybersecurity practices?
Yes, and one keynote there is where you do a business impact analysis, then you got the core revenue servers or infrastructure that without it, you're not going to gain any profit. So from there, you just start your cybersecurity strategy in a short, mid, and long term.
Thank you. You had a question over there?
Yeah, the original question I had was around low-hanging fruit, and I think that's a fantastic answer to that. What I was wondering is, if you did have an unlimited budget and could create like any product to solve, right? It's in this kind of hypothetical magic type of situation, like you have budgets that are pretty strong already. What are the challenges that you're facing that technology isn't able to address today?
I can answer that real easy, and that's you can have all the money in the world. It's getting your end users to follow the security policies. So you can spend all the money you want on cybersecurity if nobody's going to turn on MFA when you roll it out, which we've all been there. We've got those 5 employees that still won't turn it on. You can spend all the money you want on this budget. It doesn't, if you can't get end employees to buy into it by actually participating in what you're trying to do, then you might as well have not spent the money in the first place on it.
Yep, that's exactly it. There's so many things. I mean, not just the end user, but leadership really owning it, and part of that's on us to communicate it. I mean, it's like seatbelts and smoking and so many things that are either good or bad, and people just for some reason don't, or even backups to this day. And I'm sure you probably aren't, you're thinking, hey, what can we develop next? And we're not really helping there because, but I mean, that's a big one. That's a really, really great question, and it's hard.
For me on that one also, it's not just unlimited money, but it's like you need time to put in, project time to put things. There's so much that the team can do that you have to prioritize it. Although you can have everything, there still needs time to install it, configure it, deploy it, all of that, and just that needs prioritization.
Yes, and a great question. At the beginning of the year, I was able to be in a board of directors meeting where they said it's a construction industry, and they're number one over there in Mexico. 99% of their clients are from the U.S. And the board of directors stated, we have unlimited budget, so what's going to be your strategy? And everybody said, you know what, let's go do human error, let's go to work with the people, with all the as they say, ActiveJ or MFA, go for the principle, but just consciousness and cybersecurity. So the board of directors agreed that you can have unlimited budget, all the tools and quantum tools and everything, artificial intelligence tools, but it comes down to the user. So.
I just thought of another big one, and I think anyone who works for a large organization knows this one too. A way to manage silos, especially in a large organization, because I think that all of us have seen the shadow IT problems or a development environment, and I know there's third-party tools, endpoint systems that you can put on those, but that too is and unfortunately these are not, I feel like a lot of the problems that we're talking about here aren't necessarily technical problems as much as human being problems.
Thank you. I think you had a question? They need it for online. Here's coming.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name's Jody. I'm more on the customer service side, so the support side in IT. And I can speak to what I try to do for training when I talk to everyone, is I give them a little nugget. And I say, okay, if they have an issue and I go on a little further, and solve their problem, then I'll say, you know, maybe next time you want to do X, Y, and Z. And I always try to throw in a nugget about protection, about any type of, you know, type of hacking or anything like emails. I'll get questions all the time from people. So even in the healthcare industry, they're curious of how to protect they're passionate actually at protecting themselves and the patients. So I try to train up, and it helps a great deal. So you get support on the support side like I am, and from the upper, you know, doctors and then, you know, board and everything, and then you can go down and up and protect the whole environment. Have people always watching.
For end users, the big one, I was talking about some of our folks who have had LinkedIn breaches. The big ones, some of it is back to the basics, right? Strong passwords in a password vault so that you have unique passwords for every single account, and then MFA everywhere possible. And maybe multi-factors of authentication looks like Face ID, looks like, you know, Eric was mentioning text is not the way to go anymore, right? But the geolocation matching, and then turning on, you know, like say Gmail or Netflix will give you those email notices where it says, hey, I noticed a new device or new IP logged in with your account, teaching folks how to review that. But a lot of it really is the basics of, you know, download Dashlane and put on, you know, monitoring on the have I been pwned, right? So like watching your accounts, having secure passwords, I think if you can just kind of check those, you know, say 4 or 5 boxes, it'll put you in a stronger security posture for personal life things.
So we're approaching closing. There's one more question down there. Yeah.
Each of you, what is the one tool you wish existed that doesn't exist yet? Let's not talk about budgets.
Fix the
I
human
used to be a CISO years ago, right? There's a lot of tools out there.
Fix the human error.
What is the one tool you wish you had that doesn't exist yet?
To fix the human error. If you have a magic bullet for that, that will be cool.
I was thinking earlier for, you know, we're a fairly cloud-based shop, and I was thinking about even to the low-hanging fruit question of third-party vendor management for, you know, SSO apps is so difficult for, you know, DLP or even just general end-user behavior. So some sort of monitoring for activity, you know, in your environment, pivoting from your environment to other third-party security, really kind of bringing that whole landscape together and having monitoring throughout not just your environment, but your vendor third-party SaaS environments too. You know, it's really tough to kind of bring all of that together and have a complete and total picture of your threats and your risk, you know, everywhere when you have SaaS vendors.
For me, it's something that tells me the ownership of a SharePoint folder, that it's not based on groups, but actual users or what the users needs. I said, this is the one person and this is everything they can see, including SharePoint folders. That's our biggest pain point.
For me, it's an integrity pill. One huge international company was hacked that hackers got hire internal employees through Slack, and they just give away the credentials and confidential information. So it has been hard to find like integrity people, the people that has integrity. So if I will have that magic pill, that'll be great.
Geez, that's a really, really good question. I mean, there's a lot of smart people with smart products, and we already hit the other side of that, which is there's a lot of less smart people who make bad choices and override. So no matter how good the products are, it's about culture and people. But I don't know. I mean, for me, one thing that came to mind was the whole. A friend of mine calls it the single glass of pain. But you know, something that's truly multi-platform, that's truly vendor neutral, that allows you to not have to store all of your data in their specific database or their cloud or their whatever, where you can view a whole bunch of different screens in one place. And I mean, I guess we kind of have that now with everything runs in SaaS, so you can run it in a web browser and tabs, but that's the best I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff already out there.
I guess I'll bring it around. I'd love a security product that you just pay for one time. It's not a subscription service. The good old days.
The vendors love you right now, by the way, because everything's going that.
Nice. So closing questions. What advice would you give to someone who aspires to enter the cybersecurity field?
I'll go first. Find a mentor, number one. Second, be patient and persistent. People are all busy. It's not that they are avoiding you, but be patient and be persistent. They want to know how serious you are before they want to extend their hand.
What was the question? Like final comments?
Well, what kind of advice would you want to give? We have a lot of people here that come in that want to get into cybersecurity. What advice would you give them?
I'd say everything is about relationships, and the soft skills are more important than the technical ones. You're going to get the technical ones, and it's a lot easier. When I'm hiring people, yes, it's great if they have a lot of background and technical experience, but they have to be a fit. And for me, that's number one. I can train the technical, especially nowadays, everything is GUI based. There's less and less need for those higher skills, but you need to have the soft skills.
And I have one last question for everyone on the panel. Again, one more round of applause for our sponsors here today, because we definitely couldn't put this on without our sponsors. But on behalf of the sponsors, I have a question for all of you who are leaders in decision-making roles of your organizations. We all know that it's really hard to get in front of a decision maker. It's really hard for me to get in front of you guys just to get you on my panels. So for all the sponsors in here, what would your best advice be to them? How could they get in front of you, and how can they make themselves different from all the competitors out there? If I could have each of you give your insight on that. And if all the sponsors, hopefully this helps you out in getting in front of the right decision makers, because we know it's tough.
I would say add something unique to the pitch. We get, as IT professionals, tons of voicemails and calls all the time, and obviously we're not all going to respond to it. And I'm not saying show up at the office in the middle of an audit or something like that, which I've had happen with someone that wanted my attention once, but it just make your pitch unique, and to some degree, it's just like the elevator pitch concept of any kind of sales tactic, something that makes you stand out amongst other competition out there.
Yeah, I always think about it, the what's in it for me on both sides, right? So it's mutually beneficial, and like Vimal was talking about in his keynote, the what you give and what you get. And a lot of us, if you have certifications, you're looking for CPE opportunities. So is there, as a vendor, training you could offer, additional education you could offer? Is there something that you could give to where it's beneficial for that person to meet with you, and then you happen to build a relationship? It builds from there, right? And then you're the person that we'll go to when we have a need. So a lot of that relationship building and having a value prop for the person that you're trying to reach out to.
So for me, it's also get to know my team. I trust them. They're involved a lot of the times in their decisions. We have a specific format when we look at and evaluate vendors, so look at the requirements that we're asking, and then we'll try to be as details on that and do. But the team makes a lot of decisions, because eventually they'll be the one maintaining the tools. So we want to make sure that they're happy with it. A lot of them like swags, but it's just really work with them to make sure that they're in there.
It's a very good question, I would say. So if you send email, get out of the bot mode. I think I spoke to some of you. I mentioned that. Be a human. Okay? Be a human. One guy sent me a video, explained about his product very well, how important that is to our business. Do your homework. Okay, before sending it. I still get emails from partners or vendors that at Celgene you use this one. We see that in Celgene you use. I left Celgene 3 years back. Do your homework before sending it. Okay, so always draft or craft a message that can be relatable to the current experience. Okay.
For me, it's nurture that relationship with your client. A great customer service, it's always a hook for us. I mean, you guarantee that we're going to give you our trust, and we're going to be consistent with you guys year after year.
Let me give you 5 for that. For me, I've and some of the vendors here probably have talked with me about this, but first of all, I agree with the team thing. My team has to want to have this vendor come in. I try to vet that so that they don't get deluged with, no offense, but with all the marketing. But then if you're in the door, or if you start to get your feet in the door, or even if you're not with me, hopefully with whoever you're doing it with, be an REI. And I don't work for REI or, but be that company that, it may or may not be the cheapest even, but you just go overboard with support, at least from my perspective. When I go to an REI, I go in there and I want to buy a backpack and they help fit it on me, I go out, if I don't like it and come back, they're like, we'll swap it, we'll give you a refund, you name it, we'll do whatever it takes. And that makes me come back. And that makes me, even when I was working for some large organizations where I can't refer people formally, if another CISO was to call me and say, hey Darren, what do you think about this product? I'm certainly going to give them my opinion. I'm not going to speak on behalf of my organization, but I'm going to give them my opinion, good or bad. And to me, the best thing you can do is you can be that REI. You can just bend over backwards and not so interested in selling me a backpack that you don't fit me with the right one. And a lot of the big companies nowadays, in my experience, they're just hooked on sell, 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 sell. We don't care if it works for you. We don't care if it's secure for you. We just want to sell you more junk. And trust me, I'll buy all kinds of stuff if I'm happy with what I have.
Not these partners. Okay.
Right. Yeah, of course not these folks. No.
Is there any other questions in the audience? We have about 2 or 3 more minutes. Just want to make sure we addressed everyone's questions. Okay, well, it is my honor to have you all with us today and to have this great group of panelists up here that have spent the day with us. So how about a round of applause for our panelists up here? And thank you all for spending the day with us here in San Diego. My team's going to come up and pull for prizes. Our sponsors have some pretty amazing